Hey Glamfam, Linwood here. Today I'm going to be talking to you guys about protective styling, what it is, what it isn't, and common misconceptions. So if that interests you, stay tuned and let's dive right in. Now before we begin, if you find any value in this video, please do me a favor by clicking the thumbs up button, and if you're not already a subscriber to the Glamfam channel, go ahead and join the family. What are you waiting on? So protective styling is commonly referred to, especially in the natural hair community, and a lot of people think that several different styles can be protective styles. But when it comes down to it, there's really a guideline for what's considered protective and what's actually damaging. And unfortunately, in a lot of instances, I see people where they're doing protective styles that actually end up being quite damaging and are doing the exact opposite to their hair. So let's talk about what a protective style is first, and then from there we can discuss your different options and how to do them safely to ensure that it actually is protective. Protective style in the natural community is defined as something that's able to protect your ends from being manipulated on a regular or daily basis, and that way your hair is able to retain more of its length and grow out a bit more. Now the issue is that is really kind of limited in its scope in terms of what's considered protective, because a lot of things in that instance are considered protective. In my instance, the way I look at a protective style is like this. It needs to protect your ends, your roots, your edges, and your reputation. When it comes down to it, if something is only protecting your ends, but it's too tight and it's not protecting your edges, now we've got an issue. If it's pulling too hard on those roots and it's causing issues with hair loss or with breakage, it's not protective. So these are some simple aspects to kind of look at there. And of course, if a style is pulling out your edges or if it's causing bald spots, things like that, it's gonna impact your reputation in terms of like, oh, okay, well, do people feel like you have a healthy head of hair or things like that? It's like, okay, now what are we protecting when we think about a protective style? It's gotta be more than the ends. The whole point here is to ensure that you have healthy, growing hair and you're retaining length. If we're breaking, we're not retaining length. If we're causing hair loss, we're definitely not retaining length. So these are some things we want to consider. That being said, when we look down into protective styling, things like that, a lot of people will say things like, oh, okay, well, crochet braids are protective styles, wigs are protective styles, sew-ins are protective styles, cornrows are protective styles. Some people will even say that quick weaves are protective styles. And all of that has the potential to be a protective style. But now the issue becomes, how do we ensure that it's actually protective and that it's not damaging? And this is where information really comes in key. So let's say something like crochet braids. You really don't want to braid down extremely tight, because you know you're going to go back in and force in hair up underneath those braids and tie it, which is going to pull that tighter. So we want to ensure that we're not causing a ton of issue with that, especially if you're taking crochet braids and instantly pulling them back and it's causing those edges to gradually slide back. You've lost the protective aspect of the style. Another thing to think about is before you go in any protective style, you really want to ensure that you've deep conditioned, making sure your protein and your moisture balance are where they're supposed to be before you go into a style like this for a potentially long period of time. You want to ensure that that hair is in proper moisture protein balance to make sure that it's not breaking or anything like that. Keep in mind, the number one cause of breakage is dryness. So when it comes down to a style and you're trying to ensure that it's protective, we want to ensure that our moisture and protein balance are high so our hair is strong and it's still supple and soft, and that way it can take the manipulation of the style, and when you're taking the style back down and you're doing the manipulation there, it's not causing breakage either. So that way we're able to retain the length, again making it a protective style. When it comes down to things like cornrows, things along that line, you want to ensure that not only is it not too tight, but you want to make sure that as you're getting your hair braided, when they come behind the ear, you're tilting your head down so it stretches the skin in the neck here, and that way you don't end up with bumps back here in the nape that will actually lead to hair loss over time. If you're doing something like individuals or box braids, you want to ensure, or even things with like kinky twist or goddess locks, anything that's going to be like that individual braid type of aspect, you really want to ensure that you give that hair at least a week before you go pulling it up into high ponytails. Often if it's braided down this way and you pull it up the opposite way or up into a ponytail the same day or within that first week, really, a lot of times it's going to cause excessive pulling, things like that. Typically you want to wait until the hair has enough movement on its own, and then from there you can pull it up and things like that. In the meantime, if let's say you're in the military, something along that lines, and it has to be pulled back, do a low and loose pony rather than a high and tight pony. And that way you're able to limit the amount of tension that you're putting on those edges all the way around, and it's taking a bit more care there. If you're doing something like a sew-in, you want to keep in mind that braid down shouldn't be excessively tight, and you also don't want that stitching to be excessively tight. Any type of tension like that has the ability to remove hair from the follicles, causing hair loss either temporarily or permanently, but either way it's not protective if you're losing hair like that. When it comes down to quick weaves especially, they should be put in correctly, meaning that you're not stretching the tracks when you're placing them on the head, because of course, once it dries and tightens and you let it go, it's going to want to slide back as soon as you let it go. So that being said, if it's attached to your hair by the time it's dried and you've pulled it to reach the edges, when you let it go, it's going to pull back in the opposite direction. It's going to remove hair on the outside corners of that track where you have it pinned down or adhered down. Same thing goes for proper removal. If you're not removing the tracks correctly, you're going to have an issue there in terms of it removing hair, things along that line. So you want to make sure you're using a remover on there and allowing it time to be able to soften up the glue before you go in and remove. If there's any type of tugging required to remove a glued in track, even if it is a quick weave, you want to ensure that you are allowing that solvent to break it down. Or you could even go an extra step and put a bit of paper underneath the stocking cap, things like that, to ensure the glue is not touching your hair at all. Things along that line, so you're actually tending to the needs of that hair. Now, I also want you to consider things like micro braids or Senegalese twists, where it's a very small section of hair and you've got a good length or a good amount of hair on there. In that instance, it's really difficult to consider something a protective style because it becomes a lot of weight on a very small section of hair. So even if it wasn't done excessively tight, it's a lot of constant strain put on a very small section or quadrant of hair that can cause hair loss over time, or can cause hair loss honestly in a single dealing, things like that. Even when it comes down to wearing wigs, you want to ensure that you're not wearing extremely tight cornrows and braids underneath there. You just need it to be flat. You don't need it to hold your soul all up in there. It doesn't have to be tight like that. So understanding that aspect when it comes down to dealing with your hair is going to be greatly beneficial, because it allows you to keep the health of your hair underneath or within these styles, ensuring that your hair is not being damaged. Now, for me personally, I honestly prefer to trim hair prior to putting it into any style, braids included. Some people don't like that if they're braiders, but honestly, having a trim does not prevent me from being able to braid the hair well, and split ends do tend to travel up the shaft of the hair more, which would lead to breakage and cause you to lose length and things like that. So in that instance, you may want to consult with your stylist prior to getting a style done based on their skill set, but I would always advise getting a trim either immediately before, or if your stylist does not prefer that, doing a trim immediately after a protective style, and that way you're able to ensure that you are taking care of the needs there. Now, there's one more piece here that's really important, and that's ensuring that you are spacing out and allowing your scalp to breathe in between protective styles. While protective styles are great, you want to ensure that if you've had any style that has tension, braids, tighter twists, things like that, that you want to do 2 heads of braids, and then from there let your hair rest for at least 1 week. So 2 heads of cornrows, rest for 1 week, or 2 heads of individuals, rest for 1 week, or 1 head of cornrows and a head of individuals, rest for a week. That way your scalp is not constantly being pulled on. It has time to breathe and to get fresh air through there. All that is really important. Now, the last part here is ensuring that you're always keeping the scalp clean, healthy, supple. All of that is important. A healthy scalp that's clean is going to grow hair better, and it's going to ensure that you have more length. If you have additional questions pertaining to protective styles and what they are and what they aren't, please let me know down in the comment section below. I hope this video has been highly informative for you, and if it has, let me know by giving this video a thumbs up. If you're not already a member of the Glam Fam, please subscribe, and don't forget to check us out on TikTok and Instagram at GetGlamFam. Until next time, you guys, take care, God bless, and stay glam. You know I love you, boo. Bye.